I'm Jonathon Lopez, and I went through the Praxis program towards the end of 2021. You know, when I was going through high school, I would say they were the initial period of high school for me. I cared quite a bit. I put a lot of effort in, if that makes sense. But for some personal reasons, I think toward the end, I lost a lot of my motivation and a lot of my care. And I was probably what you describe as a horrible student. I slept in most of my classes. I didn't do any of the work I didn't need to do to just scoot by. You know, and that was kind of me. I did inevitably drop out, so don't recommend that so much. But yeah, that was kind of me in high school, just a bit of a bum. I think after high school for me was a bit of a tumultuous time. There was a lot of uncertainty. I kind of just went straight into like the working world. I worked at a bunch of like odd jobs, you know, like oil change places, pizza places. I worked at Walmart for a little time. I think until I inevitably ended up at Whole Foods. And I'll say that part of my life, I didn't really like think about options I had. You know, hindsight's 2020, but then for me, it was just survival. It was just, I need a job, I need to do that. And that's kind of just what I did. I just got a job and I just kept chugging along through that. I was just about to turn 22 when I first heard about Praxis on a podcast a minute ago. It's a podcast by a man named Matt D'Avella called The Ground Up Show. He was interviewing TK Coleman just about a bunch of things in general. And through the course of that, Praxis came up, kind of like as this alternative education brand. A lot of cool stuff, kind of gained my interest, and I was like, that sounds like a really good path. That could kind of like help me get somewhere in my life where I would want to be and prefer to be, especially because for me, I dropped out, right? So dropping out means you don't get to just go to college. I'd have to get a GED, I'd have to go to a community college to build up credits, and then I can look at a college. Also, the cost of it, exceptionally prohibited. So when I kind of heard about Praxis, like, through that way, that was kind of like my gateway to learning about the program and what it is. The biggest thing was I just needed to find something that could be a catalyst to change the trajectory of my life, right? I didn't have a ton I felt going for me long term. A lot of it was like, my current opportunity is to grow in grocery or to go find another job that'll hire me, right? And I kind of just didn't know what I could do and what was out there. So for me, when I was digging through and learning more about Praxis, and I talked to a couple of the leadership in Praxis, you know, Mitchell, Cameron at the time, right? I kind of learned a bit more about like what were the different things that they did, what were the typical like jobs and like areas that they went through, what was the things that they taught, you know, and that's kind of what like attracted me to, you know, inevitably sign up and apply. I think the easiest way to say it, to simplify it, is a lot of traditional education, especially in the public school system that I went through, is more you're taught facts. And you're taught these are things that you should know. And the interesting thing about Praxis that I really resonate with is Praxis doesn't teach you about things. It teaches you about how to think about things, how to find answers, and how to like learn, and then how to demonstrate the value behind, you know, what you're doing, right? Where, you know, I had a lot of teachers when I was in the later years of high school who are very fixated on this idea of you need to figure out a major, you need to talk to like an admissions person and figure out like what exactly your path should be to go, you know, get this degree and stuff. But there was no conversation about like, why is that valuable to the world? How is that helpful to you, you know, to generate value for a company and ultimately like get hired and have a career, you know, which I never loved that part of it. I kind of just dove headfirst into operations, or revenue operations specifically. So when I first joined Aptitude 8, I was what we called an associate. You can think of it somewhat like a training kind of role. The expectations for an associate are like you just drink from the fire hose, learn and do all the things, and progressively get better. And you know, within about, I think 8 months or so, I got promoted to be a consultant. We do our consultancy roles and levels, so it's L1 upwards to L6 right now. And those are kind of just like levels of expertise, if you will. There's a lot of nuance behind it. But for me, a lot of my progression was I was an associate and then I was a consultant and I started getting my own clients. So I would run the accounts at the high level with another consultant or another associate and a lot of that. And at first it kind of started out small. You know, I'd have a small client here or there and they weren't like big clients, but these were like small SaaS customers, right? Not overly complex things and whatnot. And the interesting thing about, I think, my journey at Aptitude 8, it's different from a lot of other people in a lot of ways, is that I wanted to get super technically focused. And I wanted to learn a lot more about like high level tech architecture and integrations and just all of the, you know, the really crazy complicated stuff. And because of that, I got a lot of opportunities to like work with developers and over time continue to build up kind of on those skills. And throughout the years, I've just progressed over both seniority and like the level of complexity of the projects and accounts that I work on. I didn't even know revenue operations existed until Praxis showed me. And I also don't know that, by nature of what was in my environment or what I was exposed to, I would ever have learned it. I always keep my eye open for new opportunities to see what's out there. You never really know. And I think it's valuable to be aware that something really cool could come up and you should be open to that, or at least exploring what that could look like. But the main plan for me really is to kind of just keep doing what I'm doing. My long-term goal, at least at this company for the next couple of years, is to eventually move from being a consultant to what we call a solutions engineer, which is a person who, as opposed to running engagements with clients, mainly handles like the scoping and the technical, problem solving behind like how we can be doing these things instead of like the building of them. I kind of have this saying I tell to myself, which is it's just the words always forward. And I think it's very valuable, especially when you're more young on, no matter what's happening, is that as long as you're tenacious and curious and you keep pushing, you'll eventually get to where you want to be. And it's okay to not know, it's okay to not have zero clue necessarily, but I think it's valuable to just keep trying to move forward, keep finding things. If you don't know what you want to do, that's okay. Try everything, be as open-minded as you can to all of the things, and eventually stuff will start to fall into place. And I think having that hunger and that drive, to keep being curious, to keep learning on those things is one of the most valuable things. And I think if I had it earlier on, my life I'd probably be in an even crazier spot with my life right now. My life has changed so drastically from just 5 years ago before I even knew Praxis existed and I had the job I have now to now. Like, it's quite literally unimaginable.